need to share something that Jesus revealed to me specifically about believers over 60 and what will happen before November 21st. This isn't general prophetic warning or vague spiritual guidance. This is specific, urgent revelation about a unique assignment God has for mature believers in the coming weeks, and why those who are over 60 are positioned for something extraordinary that younger believers simply cannot accomplish. What Jesus showed me challenges everything our culture teaches about aging, and everything the church has assumed about older believers being less spiritually significant than the young. The truth is exactly opposite. Those over 60 are about to step into the most important season of their entire lives, a brief but critical window between now and November 21st, when their prayers, their wisdom, their spiritual authority will matter more than at any previous point. The encounter that changed everything. It happened on November 1st at 5 a.m. I was praying, wrestling with my own sense of being in life's final chapter, wondering what purpose remains at this age, when the culture considers you irrelevant, and even the church often sees older believers as more burden than asset. In that vulnerable moment of questioning, Jesus appeared with an answer that shattered my assumptions. His presence was gentle but intense, and his first words stunned me. Clint, I haven't brought you this far, given you this many years, just to have you coast into eternity. The next 20 days are the most critical of your life. What I'm about to show you applies not just to you, but to every believer over 60. The church needs to understand that I've been preparing mature believers specifically for this moment, and the window for your most important work is now. But what Jesus revealed next about older believers will shock you. Then he showed me why those over 60 are uniquely positioned for what's coming before November 21st. Not because older believers are more righteous or more loved by God, but because decades of life experience, accumulated wisdom, tested faith, and freedom from certain pressures that burden younger believers create capacities that simply don't exist in the young. Jesus showed me that he's been allowing believers to live longer, not just as blessing or mercy, but because he's preparing a generation of intercessors, wisdom bearers, and spiritual warriors for a specific moment in history. That moment is now. The preparation is complete. The assignment is being released, and the window of opportunity is just 20 days. First truth: your prayers carry weight that younger prayers don't. The first thing Jesus revealed about believers over 60 is that their prayers carry spiritual weight that younger believers' prayers, however sincere and passionate, simply don't possess yet. This isn't about God playing favorites or valuing age over youth. It's about spiritual dynamics that develop only through time. Jesus showed me that when someone who's walked with him for decades prays, when they call on his name based on 40 or 50 or 60 years of watching him prove faithful, when they intercede from foundation of tested faith that survived seasons that would have destroyed weaker believers, those prayers carry authority in the spiritual realm that passionate but untested prayers cannot match. What makes your prayers so powerful will surprise you. He showed me specific spiritual mechanics. When a 70-year-old who's walked faithfully through multiple decades of trials prays for someone in crisis, they're not just hoping God might help. They're standing on decades of seeing him work in impossible situations, declaring that same faithfulness into current circumstances. That accumulated testimony creates spiritual momentum that younger believers haven't had time to build. Jesus emphasized that the 20 days between now and November 21st our critical intercession window. Events are unfolding in both spiritual and natural realms that will shape trajectories for years to come. The prayers of mature believers during this window will determine outcomes that affect not just individuals but entire communities, nations, and the advancement of God's kingdom. The assignment for believers over 60 is clear. Pray with the authority your years have earned you. Not timid requests hoping God might help, but declarations based on decades of his faithfulness. Intercede for your family, your church, your community, your nation with confidence that comes from watching God prove himself over and over. Your prayers during these 20 days matter more than you can imagine. Second truth, you've been released from burdens that constrain the young. The second thing Jesus revealed is that believers over 60 have been released from certain burdens and pressures that constrain younger believers, and this freedom positions them for spiritual effectiveness that younger people cannot access while they're still carrying those weights. Jesus showed me that younger believers, even those with strong faith and genuine calling, are necessarily focused on building careers, raising children, establishing financial stability, managing all the practical pressures of life in its middle stages. These aren't wrong priorities, they're appropriate to that season, but they do limit availability for certain kinds of spiritual work. The freedom you have now is actually a spiritual weapon. Believers over 60, especially those whose children are grown and whose careers are complete or winding down, have freedom that they've never had before. Freedom from having to build reputation or climb ladders. Freedom from needing to impress anyone or maintain appearances. Freedom from the energy-consuming work of raising children. Freedom from having to plan for decades of future that younger people must consider. Jesus showed me that this freedom isn't just nice bonus of aging. It's strategic positioning for spiritual warfare and intercession that requires availability. Younger believers simply don't have. When you're no longer consumed with building career or managing young family, you have capacity for prayer, for spiritual warfare, for ministry to others that wasn't possible during your busier years. The assignment for these 20 days is to leverage your freedom. Don't waste it on trivial pursuits or comfortable distractions. You have capacity right now that you won't have forever, and that most younger believers don't have at all. Use it for kingdom purposes. Spend hours in prayer if you can. Minister to people who need wisdom you've accumulated. Engage in spiritual warfare with the time and focus your freedom provides. Third truth, you carry wisdom that cannot be taught. The third thing Jesus revealed is that believers over 60 carry a specific kind of wisdom that cannot be transmitted through teaching, cannot be learned from books, and cannot be accelerated through any means except actually living through decades of life while walking with God. This wisdom is desperately needed right now, and only mature believers possess it. Jesus showed me that younger believers, however intelligent and well-taught, lack perspective that only time provides. They haven't lived long enough to see how situations that seem catastrophic actually worked for good. They haven't experienced enough to understand that current crises, however intense, are not unprecedented. They haven't accumulated the pattern recognition that comes from watching God work through multiple cycles of what seems like similar situations. What you know through experience is treasure the young desperately need. This isn't about older believers being smarter or more spiritual. It's about having lived long enough to see long-term consequences of choices, to watch how situations unfold over years instead of just weeks, to understand that God's timing often spans decades rather than days. That perspective is invaluable during crisis when younger believers are panicking because they lack the long view that experience provides. Jesus showed me that during the 20 days before November 21st, younger believers will face decisions, crises, and challenges where the wisdom of mature believers could make the difference between catastrophe and breakthrough, but that wisdom must be offered, shared, made available. It won't help anyone if older believers remain silent or isolated. The assignment is to be available as wisdom bearer. When younger believers are panicking about situations that you recognize from your own past, speak peace based on what you've learned. When they face decisions that you've navigated before, share what experience has taught you. Don't preach or lecture, but offer perspective that only decades of walking with God can provide. Your wisdom during these 20 days could literally save people from making mistakes that would cost them years to recover from. Please tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your location. If you're over 60 and hearing this message about your critical assignment before November 21st, I need to know this is reaching you. Tell me where you are and that you're ready to step into what God is calling you to in these final 20 days. Fourth truth, your example of finishing strong matters eternally. The fourth thing Jesus revealed is that how believers over 60 finish their race, particularly in these critical 20 days before November 21st, will set examples that influence generations. Younger believers are watching to see whether faith actually sustains people through aging, decline, and approach to death, or whether it's just comforting mythology that fails when tested by life's final challenges. Jesus showed me that one of the enemy's primary strategies against older believers is to make them coast, to convince them their significant work is behind them, to get them focused on comfort and maintenance rather than on mission and purpose. When mature believers buy that lie and spend their final years in self-focused retreat from engagement, it teaches younger believers that faith doesn't actually provide meaning and purpose that transcends aging. But when you finish strong, you change what younger generations believe is possible. Conversely, when believers over 60 remain engaged, when they demonstrate that faith provides purpose regardless of age, when they show that the final chapter can be the most significant rather than just decline into death, it creates hope and vision for younger believers watching them. They see that following Christ isn't just meaningful when you're young and vigorous, it's meaningful until your last breath. Jesus emphasized that these 20 days before November 21st are opportunity to demonstrate finishing strong, not by trying to act young or pretending you don't face limitations that come with age, but by showing that spiritual vitality doesn't require physical vitality, that kingdom impact doesn't depend on youthful energy, that the most important work can happen in life's final chapters. The assignment is to engage fully during these 20 days. Don't coast, don't retreat into comfortable isolation, don't act like your significant years are behind you. Pray with authority, share your wisdom, minister to others, engage in spiritual warfare. Demonstrate that life in Christ is about faithful service until the end, not about retiring from significance when you hit certain age. Fifth truth, you're being positioned for harvest role. The fifth thing Jesus revealed is that mature believers are being specifically positioned for critical role in harvest that's beginning. Jesus showed me that as spiritual awakening emerges, particularly among young people, there will be desperate need for mature believers who can help new converts understand and integrate their encounters with Christ. Young people coming to faith through dramatic conversion don't need entertainment or slick programs. They need spiritual mothers and fathers who've walked with God long enough to help them process what's happened to them and what it means to follow Christ long term. This requires the kind of mature wisdom that only decades of faithful walking can provide. The harvest role you're called to is something only you can fill. Jesus showed me young believers encountering Christ powerfully, but then being confused about next steps, vulnerable to false teaching, uncertain about how to integrate new faith into their lives. He showed me the tragedy of new converts being left to figure it out alone because the church had sidelined its mature believers instead of deploying them as spiritual parents for the harvest. But he also showed me the beauty of what happens when mature believers step into this role. New converts being adopted into spiritual families. Young believers receiving wisdom from those who've walked the path for decades. Discipleship happening through relationship with spiritual parents rather than just through programs and classes. The assignment for these 20 days is to prepare for harvest role. Ask God to bring new believers into your sphere who need spiritual parenting. Be willing to invest time and energy into people who are just starting their journey. Don't assume you're too old or too limited to make difference in someone else's faith. The harvest is coming, and mature believers are essential to helping new converts become established disciples. Why November 21st is the deadline. After showing me these 5 truths about believers over 60, Jesus explained why November 21st specifically is significant. This isn't an arbitrary date. It marks a transition point where the spiritual season shifts, where the particular window of opportunity he's been describing closes, where what was possible before becomes exponentially more difficult after. Jesus showed me that between now and November 21st, There's unusual openness in the spiritual realm for the prayers, wisdom, and ministry of mature believers. Circumstances are converging that create receptivity to what older believers offer. But after November 21st, the season shifts. The openness narrows. The specific opportunities available now won't be available in the same way. What happens after November 21st should motivate you to act now. This doesn't mean believers over 60 suddenly become irrelevant after November 21st. It means the particular assignment Jesus is giving for these 20 days is time-sensitive. The convergence of spiritual dynamics, natural circumstances, and divine timing creates a window that won't remain open indefinitely. He emphasized that this is mercy, giving clear timelines so mature believers know they need to act now, rather than assuming they can wait. Procrastination until after November 21st means missing the optimal window for maximum impact. The work can still be done later, but with more difficulty and less effectiveness than what's possible in these critical 20 days. How to respond during these 20 days. Based on what Jesus revealed, here's the specific practical guidance for believers over 60 during the 20 days between now and November 21st. First, commit to serious prayer and intercession. Set aside significant time daily, at least an hour if your schedule and health permit, for sustained prayer. Don't just pray quick requests. Intercede deeply for your family, your church, your community, your nation. Pray with the authority your years have earned. Stand on decades of God's faithfulness and declare that faithfulness into current situations. Keep a prayer journal during these 20 days. Write down specific things you're praying for, specific guidance you receive, specific answers you see. This creates record of what God does through your intercession during this critical window. Second, make yourself available to younger believers as wisdom bearer. Let your pastor know you're available to counsel, mentor, or simply be present for people who need mature perspective. Connect with younger believers in your life and let them know you're available if they need to process decisions or situations where your experience could help. Don't wait for people to seek you out. Be proactive about offering your availability. Many younger believers would benefit from your wisdom but hesitate to ask because they don't want to burden you. Make it clear you're available and eager to help. The most important action you can take in these 20 days is this. Third, engage fully in whatever capacity you have. Don't let physical limitations become excuse for spiritual disengagement. If you can't do what you once did physically, focus on what you can do spiritually. If you can't travel or minister in public ways, make your home a place of prayer and hospitality. If you can't serve in visible ways, serve through intercession that happens in secret but has visible impact. The enemy wants you to think that because you can't do everything, you shouldn't do anything. Reject that lie. Do what you can with whatever capacity you have. Your faithful engagement during these 20 days, even if it seems small to you, matters in ways you can't see from natural perspective. Fourth, prepare to receive and parent new believers. Ask God to bring people across your path who need spiritual mentoring. When He does, be willing to invest in them even if it costs you comfort or convenience. This might mean opening your home, sharing meals, making time for conversations, being available at odd hours when someone in crisis needs to talk. Remember that effective discipleship often happens in casual moments rather than formal settings. Some of your most important ministry during these 20 days might be conversations over coffee, prayers in your living room, or wisdom shared during ordinary activities rather than in structured programs. Fifth, model finishing strong for those watching you. Live these 20 days with purpose and engagement that demonstrates faith provides meaning regardless of age. Don't act like your significant years are behind you. Don't retreat into comfortable isolation. Show through how you live that following Christ is about faithful service until your last breath. The cost of missing this window. Jesus didn't just show me the opportunity available in these 20 days. He also showed me the cost of mature believers missing this window, either through not knowing about it or through knowing but not responding. He showed me prayers that should have been prayed during this critical window but weren't because mature believers didn't understand their unique authority. He showed me younger believers making mistakes that could have been avoided if mature wisdom had been offered. He showed me new converts struggling alone who could have been established through spiritual parenting from older believers. The tragedy of wasted final years will haunt those who don't act now. He showed me believers over 60 reaching the end of their lives with regret about wasted final years, about coasting when they could have been engaged, about retreating into comfort when they could have been making eternal impact. Not because they sinned dramatically, but because they believed the cultural lie that older people are less significant and should focus on their own comfort rather than on kingdom purposes. The cost isn't just personal. When mature believers don't step into their calling during critical windows, entire communities miss out on the intercession, wisdom, and spiritual parenting they desperately need. Younger believers make preventable mistakes. New converts fall away who could have been established. Prayers that would have moved mountains aren't prayed because those with authority to pray them remain silent. The promise for those who respond. But Jesus also showed me the promise for believers over 60 who respond to this call during these 20 days. He showed me mature believers looking back from eternity on these 20 days as the most significant of their entire lives. Not because of the days themselves, but because of what they accomplished through prayer, wisdom sharing, and spiritual parenting during this critical window. He showed me families transformed because a mature believer interceded faithfully during these 20 days. Young people established in faith because a spiritual parent invested in them during this season. Communities impacted because older believers engaged fully rather than retreating into comfortable isolation. He showed me the joy of finishing well, of running the race faithfully until the end, of hearing "well done, good and faithful servant," specifically because of faithful engagement during life's final chapters, rather than coasting into eternity. Your assignment starts now. You have 20 days until November 21st. If you're over 60, this is your moment. The preparation of your entire life has been leading to this brief but critical window. Your prayers matter more now than ever. Your wisdom is desperately needed. Your example of finishing strong will impact generations watching you. Don't waste these 20 days. Don't coast. Don't retreat into comfortable isolation. Don't believe the lie that your significant years are behind you. Engage fully with whatever capacity you have. Pray with authority. Share your wisdom. Minister to others. Prepare to receive new believers. Model finishing strong. The window is closing. November 21st is coming. Will you step into what Jesus is calling you to during these critical days, or will you let the opportunity pass while you maintain comfortable routine? Your response determines not just how you finish your own race, but how many others benefit from the unique gifts God has been developing in you for decades. If you want ongoing encouragement and guidance for believers over 60 stepping into their calling, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me where you are, your age if you're comfortable sharing, and how you're responding to this call. Let's encourage each other to finish strong during these critical 20 days. November 21st is coming. Your assignment is clear. Will you step into it or let the window close?